This episode of the Order of Chaos podcast is brought to you by Tarot Academy. Tarot Academy is my 4-week long intensive all about reading tarot. Now, it doesn't matter if you've been reading for years or if you're brand new to reading the cards, this course will take your skills to the next level. It's not about memorizing the meanings of every single card. It's about forming a deep and personal relationship to each card and understanding the deck as a whole. And I'm going to give you a system that will help you do this incredibly fast. You're going to be able to go from no experience at all to being able to read for yourself, for friends and family, or even take this to a professional level. So if you'd like to join us for Tarot Academy, class starts September 23rd. Now, if you can't make it to the live class, don't worry, they are recorded and sent out immediately afterwards. Right now, you can get Tarot Academy for half off. It's only $99 for the entire month-long course, where you get access to a weekly lesson, as well as our community, where we have daily guided meditations. We've got book club. We've got all kinds of things going on. It's an incredible, supportive community. I'm super proud of this program, and I'd love to see you there.
The following message is transmitted.
All right, so welcome back to the Order of Chaos podcast. Today, my guest is Kris Spisak, and we will be talking about her new book, Becoming Baba Yaga. Kris, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's quite the honor. There are stories to tell, aren't they?
Yeah. So listen, this is embarrassing for me. Like I was just saying before the show, I didn't know who Baba Yaga was until I read your book.
It's absolutely fine. There are so many people who have no idea who Baba Yaga is. We grow up in different cultures and different perspectives and different exposures. I'm Ukrainian. I can talk to you all about Ukrainian dance and traditions and artistry and folk tales. So I have known Baba Yaga for quite a while. So no worries at all.
It's, after having, I mean, I listened to your book on Audible, which is fantastic. And 2 chapters in, I was like, how do I not know these stories? Because they're clearly so iconic to the world of witchcraft and
Absolutely.
to they're I would say they're fundamental, they're foundational to the modern idea of what a witch looks like in the Halloweenish sense,
Absolutely.
but also to practices that are and rituals that are going on today that are alive and strong.
Absolutely. Her levels of character as a change agent and a role of transformation is embodied with so much of who she is and facing our shadow self and the darkness to us. There are so many different levels that come out in Grimm's fairy tales, modern pop culture, modern spirituality, depending on different views. She is a character that touches on so much in so many different dimensions. So I'm just excited to dive into her with you.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say one of the things that stood out to me right away from the very beginning, probably more than anything else in the book, was the tale of Baba Yaga's supposed creation, with this devil going around and gathering up these wretched women. And oh my gosh. So yeah, tell us about that.
Absolutely. Every time I laugh when I'm talking about Baba Yaga, I feel like it's more of a cackle, and I just don't know what to do with that. So excuse me for that side thought. One of my favorite parts about writing this book, Becoming Baba Yaga, is there are so many academic examinations of Baba Yaga, and there's so many different belief systems about Baba Yaga. But a book didn't seem to exist that was a deep nonfiction dive into all of her possible ancestry over thousands upon thousands of years across so many different lands where she kind of stretches into different places. But even that being said, the book didn't exist that had the nonfiction exploration next to the tales. because you can find collections of Baba Yaga tales, you can find essays, you can find stories, and you can find some nonfiction about her, but you can never really find that many sources that put them side by side, where you could have this conversation looking at her origin story versus the cultural contexts that surround it. Baba Yaga's actual origins, we can't really trace exactly where she came from. She's a giant telephone game of a oral tradition that just has come to be over such a long period of time. But the common story told about her birth is this story, and I love this translation for so many reasons, but it's called The Tale of the 12 Nasty Women. Because when the devil was out to create a source of pure evil to walk the earth, because of course that was needed, right? The devil went and collected women from across the globe who were the pure essence of the worst type of women there could be, the worst type of people there could be. So he found the worst people of the world, and they were these 12 women. Oh, don't you love where this is going?
Right. Yeah.
And he throws them all into a vat. He boils the 12 women, throws ice cold stream water underneath them until it boils, and then the devil inhales the steam, sloshes it around in his mouth a little bit, spits. And thus, when the spit lands, it becomes this ancient hag of an old woman who is Baba Yaga. And that is how she was born. But the second you start listening to the story and thinking about it, okay, first we can talk about the fact that evil is 12 women, and that's a whole other thing we can unpack there.
Right.
In every single folktale that I include, I write the original tale with a little bit of a modern twist on it. So the traditional story doesn't have any details about who these 12 women are. So in my version of the story, I actually give you some details about who these women are and how awesome every single one of them is, but how they could be perceived negatively.
Absolutely. And without the context of the details of the women, the story is much worse because it's just saying women are evil. I'm gonna get 12 women, and then here we go, pure evil, right? And that exists in so many folklores.
That's why I love the Baba Yaga tales, because she is such a female force and she is such a powerhouse. But depending on when you look up her traditions, she is even evil, or she is hideous, or she is full of terror, she will kill you, or she is the ultimate fairy godmother is the worst word, like the ultimate donor figure who can transform your life and give you everything you've ever wanted. But it really depends on the teller of the tales. And that's one of those things I love unpacking. In my version of the story about the 12 nasty women, I detail who these women are and why, upon first glance, their spit and fire might look terrible to the devil who's just passing by. But of course, they get the last word, because they say there's Baba Yaga, the most evil of them all, or so thinks the devil, and who's going to contradict him? But the other fun part there is when you think about the devil's existence in the story, Baba Yaga is so much older than the Christian tradition in Eastern Europe, or what is now Eastern Europe. So the fact that the devil exists in a character in the story, you realize it's a semi-modern story. The devil wouldn't exist in a Baba Yaga story. That is definitely
Right.
Christianity fighting up against ancient Slavic belief systems, and the devil's getting the upper hand. So this legacy of this divine female presence is suddenly being subdued to this evil witch, storybook witch. So it's fascinating on so many levels.
Yeah. It really, yeah. One thing that I couldn't help but kind of draw parallels in my own mind too, because the mythology that I'm most familiar with is Norse mythology, and I do see a lot of parallels between Baba Yaga and a certain depiction of Odin as this wandering character, but also parallels with Loki, and I thought that was quite fascinating. Also with Hell, and this is just another mythology where Christianity has come in, kind of whitewashed it, erased it, rewritten it, and it's such a shame because these stories are so well, as you were saying in the book, and you're talking about oral tradition, right? Without that oral tradition, and also without the folklore, the academic studies are like, to my mind, essentially meaningless. Because you
No,
can you can look at all the facts of something, but if you're not immersed in the story of it, and that's the whole point of what it is, then the academic study is just this surface level, it's like a bullet points, I guess.
Right. And I love looking at all of the academic stuff over centuries, really, at this point, is they're all breadcrumbs,
Yeah.
right? They're all breadcrumbs that are leading us to the trail of who this character is, who she has been, what is the cultural belief systems that's surrounding her, that's shaping her into this person, where so many of her stories have this happy marriage plot at the end where Vasilisa marries the Tsar. Yay, Vasilisa. There are so many pieces where the transformative agent is housework for these young women. uh, these stories are products of their time in many things, and that has to be acknowledged and examined for its own worth. But there's so many little breadcrumbs that you find within, and when you actually take the time to stare at them and ponder, and you realize the history of goddesses that have traits that are
Mm.
still apparent in the folklore that was captured in the 1700s, but you could see that was actually traced back about 500 years prior to a goddess that had a statue that went up in Kiev in the year 980. And then 8 years later, when the leader, who was it, Prince Vladimir of Kiev in the year 908, 8 years after he put up the statue, he tore the statue down because he didn't believe in the goddesses anymore. He believed in Christianity now. So there's just
Right.
so much research to uncover.
Yeah, that too. That happening all over the world is such a I'm not even going to get into it. But so what initially drew you to Baba Yaga, and then how did that evolve into writing two books about it?
So everything I do, this is actually my fifth book.
Mm.
Everything I do is really based in the premise that well-written words and well-told stories have the ability to change the world.
Yes,
I believe
totally
that
agree.
wholeheartedly. Stories are powerful. I mean, we see that in our everyday lives, right? We're surrounded by stories being shouted at us from every single direction, from people to media to everywhere. There's stories everywhere. And what we choose to listen to has an impact. But
Yes.
then if you take it further back, not only do we own, I have kind of two sides of this. I love talking about elevating our own story craft and to elevating our own language use, because there's just such empowerment in our communications. I mean, what is more powerful than one human actually connecting with another, and oftentimes through story? But where I really came into Baba Yaga, um, is the fact that stories that linger have something to teach us. And she has been around for an incredibly long time. And she is this oral tradition of a game of telephone, where if you look at her at all these different points, she's all these kind of mutations of herself, but certain threads hold that they're just the same. And so it's interesting to see where she changes, where she stays the same. I'm Ukrainian. I grew up in a household where every single summer I spent the summer with my grandparents. And when we were with my grandparents, we had our Ukrainian table manners, and we had, or not Ukrainian table manners, we used our best Ukrainian polite manners at the table. And we learned Ukrainian folk songs and Ukrainian dances and all of this stuff. So my first exposure to the concept of Baba Yaga was as a very young child, but it was one of those things that I knew of Baba Yaga. My grandmother believed in Baba Yaga not as a story, but as a reality. And she was terrified of the presence of Baba Yaga, but it was terror, but ultimate respect. And so, as a young child, to know of in America, when you think of the concept of witch as a small child in many places, you think of Halloween. And it was this moment of eye opening for me and transformation for me to understand her understanding of Baba Yaga, and then to just sit with it for a really long time. And to paraphrase Jenna Rose Nethercott, who's the author of Thistlefoot, an amazing, amazing Baba Yaga fiction story. Jenna Rose Nethercott wrote the foreword for Becoming Baba Yaga. She said that Baba Yaga is kind of the it girl of pop culture right now. And I love that so much. She's popping up all over the place lately. And I've known her for a very long time, and I've been entranced by her for a very long time. And I think she is such a life coach in the strangest of ways. But right now, she's popping up everywhere in modern media, and there's a reason for it. So I think if we all pay attention to why the world seems fascinated with Baba Yaga right now, from Hollywood to publishing to music, she's everywhere lately if you pay attention. But then again, I noticed her everywhere, but sometimes you might not even realize all the places she's popping up.
Well, no, and that, that's the nature of synchronicity, right? Is that once you notice something, you expose yourself to it, you'll begin to notice it everywhere. And I could go on a whole rant about this because it's the way that I teach magic in my programs is always through the most grounded possible explanation of what's going on. So I love what you just said, because we not only are we surrounded by stories in a very real way, we are stories. Your
Mhm.
experience of yourself happens through stories. Your experience of your past, of your present, and of your future all happens through stories that you're telling yourself. So, a saying that we've heard in neuroscience is that you live inside the story the brain tells itself. This is
Mm,
very, very true. And so,
mhm.
stories shape your story, the stories that you listen to, the stories that are passed down culturally, right? This is something that I think the church knew in the days of kind of the pagan genocide that happened all over the world. And it's the changing of these stories, because they understood that by changing the story you change reality, right? And to me, that right there is, if I was on my deathbed and I had 10 seconds to express to the world what magic is, it's, if you
Mhm.
want to change the story of your life, change the story, you're telling yourself.
That's beautiful. I love that.
It's powerful stuff,
Mhm.
magic is very real. And these entities, so Baba Yaga to me is what I would call an egregore spirit, right? So the collective energy that's put into this character becomes something very real. So your grandma, for example, being very afraid of Baba Yaga, that makes perfect sense to me.
Absolutely. And it's funny because the world works in such mysterious ways. This is random tangent. So this week, as we're recording this, is the week that Becoming Baba Yaga met the world. It is just out this week, first week of September 2024. And so we had a party with my publisher and all of this stuff. This is kind of silly. So I was picking out a dress to wear to the party, and I'm literally in a dressing room, and all of a sudden, I put on this one dress, and outside, it was a sunny day when I went into the store. About then I put on the dress, and all of a sudden, it's like this lightning and thunderstorm just
Oh.
goes down. I'm like, apparently this is the dress. Okay. It was just one of
Yeah.
those moments. And I'm like, okay, that was a little bit of Baba Yaga energy right there that just unpacked that. Okay, this is apparently how it's all supposed to work right now. It was just one of those moments. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm just gonna listen to that and see where it takes me.
And so how did that turn out? Did you love the dress?
I did. I did.
Dude, see, now this might sound crazy to some people, but certainly not to the students in my school or to anyone who probably is listening to this podcast, but I live my life that way.
And sometimes when you just pay attention to the world speaks in weird ways. And I
Totally.
think that's so true with the stories that have stuck around for a really long time. Pay attention to them because there are so many secrets and life
Mhm.
advice of empowering you and who you are today and who you could be and understanding humanity around you. Because we think we are so modern in this day and age, and we think we're so tech savvy and all of this stuff, and we're so evolved.
No.
Humanity is the same as we have been for thousands upon thousands of years. We have the same emotions, we have the same wants, we have the desire to protect our children and better the world and live our best lives. And old stories sometimes remind us of that in ways that we don't consider on a daily modern basis. And I love approaching Baba Yaga like that.
I'm about to say something that's probably gonna make people mad at me, and that's fine. I mean, whatever. This is because I've been thinking about this for a while, and I'm in fact gonna be doing a whole video on it soon. Um, this concept of stories has been with me for a while. I've been really, really thinking about it. So mythology, right? What we exist in today, this modern world that you're talking about, here we go. So science, as we know it, is a mythology. It's a
Mm,
mythology because now don't before you turn off the show. What is mythology? Mythology is a way of explaining the world that we see to the best of our ability via stories. Right. So I could sit here and talk about atoms and electrons and the nature of the universe, but they're at the end of the day, they're words. They're words that
mhm,
describe something that you can't actually experience. You will never see an atom. We know it exists, but it's a story that we're telling, right? And the nature of science is it is a continual progression of finding out we were wrong and now we're closer to the truth. Okay, that was
Mm.
wrong, and now we're closer to the truth. Will
Mhm.
we ever get to absolute truth? I really don't think so. I don't think that's something that we can do.
Mhm.
And so we have a mythology that the world kind of, a large part of the world lives by today, that we call science. But the problem with our current modern mythology is that it's completely decoupled from meaning, from morality, from the kind of life coaching that you were talking about, which I think is the purpose of mythology. The mythology has all of that intertwined with an explanation of the natural world. Now we have a much more detailed explanation of the natural world with none of the meaning or how to live your life, or any of that. It's completely decoupled. Like quantum physics teaches you nothing about how to be a good person or
Mm.
how to walk through the world, right? But it's just a very detailed explanation of what's going on underneath the surface. Um, so all of that is just a lead up to this question: how do you feel that these stories have shaped the modern world, and how have they shaped your life in particular?
Oh, there's so much to unpack in what you just said. And before I answer the question you just asked, this whole concept of disciplines and how children go to school in this day and age, where you have an English class and you have a science class and you have a math class and you have these distinct separate disciplines. I think so often it's the interdisciplinary, when all of the different subjects combine and you can look at the world view through a lens that within the same conversation, you can speak to science and mathematics and philosophy and religion and all of these things within the same conversation. There is so much profound growth and inspiration that can come from the intertwining of these subjects.
Yes.
I will stop there because that we could go on there for a really long time.
Yeah, we could.
Um, and I'm sorry, repeat that question one more time. You're talking about my inspirations
Well,
of
yeah. So how have these stories, the stories of Baba Yaga, right? How would you say that
right.
they've shaped
Mm.
cultures, the cultural context where it's from, and how they shaped you, right? You mentioned her being this life coach. So I'm curious about that.
So Baba Yaga stories, whether they exist in the past 100 years, the past 300 years, or as far back as we can trace them, they have these commonalities. And I think for the concept of her as an absurd but beautiful life coach comes up in this idea that she has this nuance that exists when people approach her. Because in the majority of the stories, she's not going after people. In the majority of the stories, she is this wise woman deep in the woods. And if you don't know Baba Yaga, by the way, she lives in a hut that stands on chicken legs. So that's kind of her most defining feature. That I don't know how we've gotten this far into the conversation but without saying that she lives in a hut that has chicken legs, so the hut can stand up and turn around if she doesn't want you to find her front door, or the hut can just stand up and walk away. I mean, among us has not wanted a house like that, where if someone comes to our door and I just don't want to deal with this right now, we could just make your house stand up on chicken legs and walk away. But anyhow, in most of the stories about her, people are approaching her. They are often looking for her wisdom, looking for her to solve something, and they're terrified of her in most circumstances. But she always helps if there's this commonality of 4 different traits that are always shown. So if a protagonist, male or female, comes to her, and if they show her respect, if they show her that they are truly a good person with noble actions, if they show her that they are a hard worker, and if they show her that they are smart, that they're clever, that they'll actually try to figure out and problem solve, if people, protagonists, consistently show these 4 traits, Baba Yaga turns into from this terrifying horror story to someone who actually will transform someone's life. Now, she might not transform someone's life in the way that that character or person might originally ask for. Wishes are granted in all sorts of
Mhm.
strange and absurd ways, some of which are also terrifying. However, at the same time, it's these 4 traits. So think about that. Baba Yaga, in so many of her tales, has this one question she asks when people come to her. She always asks, are you here to do deeds, or are you here to run from them? What a beautiful question is that? I mean, imagine every single day of our lives as modern people in this modern, waking up in the morning and asking yourself that question. Today, am I going to do deeds or am I going to run from them? That is a transformative life question, isn't it? This is
Yes,
where
it
Baba
is.
Yaga turns into a life coach.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's fantastic. That's
Isn't
fantastic.
it?
You don't ask yourself that question. A lot of people go through their day kind of in between the two,
Mhm.
and one of the biggest problems I think that we each as individuals have, and of course not everyone has this, um, but we have this mindset of the goal of the end of the day is to sit down and do nothing.
Mm,
Like, I can't wait to sit on the couch and do nothing, watch
right,
stupid TV or whatever, And some of us are more evolved. I'm not talking about myself. Some people can't wait to sit down and read a book. That's much better, right? But still, that goal of relaxation and of doing nothing, and I'm just thinking to myself, that is a terrible goal. That's an
right.
awful goal because it leaks into everything you're doing, and it becomes like, how can I do this a way that gets me to my goal the quickest, right? But if you change your goal and your goal becomes to really accomplish a lot in the world and to make a difference with the time that you have, then who cares about TV?
Yeah,
Who
it's
cares about
absolutely
the
true. It's this concept of self-care, which is important. We should take care of ourselves. We should give ourselves grace and let ourselves have moments where we relax and let down our guard.
oh,
That's
absolutely.
wonderful.
Yes.
But that is not the objective.
It's not it's right. It's not the point of life. It's not the purpose. It's not the, every day trying to get there as quick as you can. That's that's where I see there being a big problem. And I recognize this in myself, obviously, more than anything in my 20s. That's definitely how I thought about life. Like, what do I have to do today versus what do I want to do today?
Right.
You know? And when you make accomplishment and transformation what you want, then everything changes.
Absolutely. As a writer, I don't know how many writers there are out there in your community, but I always look at the writer's life as almost a hero's journey, right? There
Totally.
are obstacles in our way, there are vines and thorns we have to push aside. There are wise figures we meet along the way. We have our obstacles and we find our way to overcome them as we're questing towards what we want, right? So, right now, I just feel like I'm kind of at the end of a quest with at least the publication. I'm not at the end of my quest of Baba Yaga. I don't think that will ever stop. But with the publication of this book, I'm kind of feeling like I'm at the end of a quest. And at the same time, that question of are you doing deeds or running from them, I kind of feel like right now, I'm like, you know what? I just finished a big deed and I'm feeling good, but that doesn't mean I'm done. There's
Oh
so much
no.
still to explore about Baba Yaga. There's so much more to explore about world storytelling and what it can teach us. There's so much more.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned the hero's journey. I just started a series on this channel where I'm talking about the major arcana of the tarot through the lens of the hero's journey, because the hero's journey is not just for writers or for storytellers. It is for everyone, because it's
Right.
the reason it exists is that it existed in our psyche before we were able to articulate it, and it's the story of your life, and it can give you a guide. So what I was saying before, right, the way that some people live their lives now, it's like they get one notch down the hero's journey and it's okay, back to the ordinary world to rest. But you got to go through the whole story, and that rest comes at the end when you've been through the entire cycle, and then you return. So maybe you're returning back to the ordinary world now, but you're gonna go on another quest, right? And
Exactly. A new quest is going to begin soon.
yeah, it's not just, it doesn't happen one time, it happens over. It's a cycle, that's why it's a circle. And it may be the overarching story of your life, but you also go through these mini cycles of the hero's journey all the time. And you could go through one in a weekend.
Absolutely.
That,
Absolutely. And so many
it,
different aspects of our life speak to it. Like we have the journey of family life, right? We
mhm,
have the
yeah.
journey of love life. We have the journey of our personal growth, our professional growth. There's so many cycles we live through. And if we keep pushing ourselves to do the deeds rather than run from them, it it's transformative. Speaking of transformative, another detail for those who are not familiar with Baba Yaga, again, well, I'd say this is I could do my sales spiel of like buy my book, learn about Baba Yaga. But also while she is this folklore type witch, and you would imagine the folklore style witch like riding around on a broom, not Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga rides around in a giant mortar with a
Mhm.
pestle that she uses kind of like a club, like a paddle as she is moving through the sky. And what is a mortar and pestle? Just think a moment. This is where you take herbs to pull out their essence. This is where you would make an ointment. This is where you'd make some really good guacamole. This is where you would have a transformation of whatever it is you put into the mortar. So when Baba Yaga sweeps a character, a person, up into her mortar to travel with them, what's happening there? The metaphor is just so very clear. She's this agent of transformation, and you can't let those aspects of her story be lost in the Hollywood John Wick videos where Keanu Reeves is a character, and in his dark world, his code name is Baba Yaga. And at the bottom of the screen during the John Wick series, every time they say Baba Yaga, it says in the subtitles, Boogeyman.
Right.
This is not the translation. I mean, you can't translate who Baba Yaga is in a subtitle, so I get that. But Boogeyman, seriously?
Yeah. Okay. Gosh, that was so great. So yes. And I think that one of this is, I have a lot of complaints about the modern world. But one of these big things that we're missing is the fear of death is
Mm,
such a huge problem in our world, right? So in my community, we have a book club, and we just finished reading this amazing book From Here to Eternity on
mm,
death and the meaning of death and thinking about death. And in the tarot, and to me, if I'm not a religious person, but if I had anything like a Bible, it's tarot cards. um so the death card and the tower, these are two cards that people are like, oh no, but these are two of the best cards in the deck, specifically death,
mhm.
because death just means transformation.
Right.
It just means the death of the old version of you and the rebirth of a new version of you, right? And it's a wonderful, beautiful, transformative thing, and it's the phoenix rising from the ashes. But in our modern culture, in every story, in every um mythos, we have aimed ourselves at being afraid of it,
Right.
right? To be afraid of that transformation into the better, stronger version of you that you can become. And so it seems like, not to get conspiratorial, but it seems like the modern world is really aimed at people. Just don't leave your comfort zone. Never, just stay right there and do nothing and be nothing. And it's scary out there. Don't bother.
Right, and in the modern world today, death is so distant. I feel like in centuries and millennia past, people were exposed to disease, to death on a regular basis, and this was not something that was far off in a hospital or in a hospice. It was something people witnessed. It was
Yeah.
something people lived with. But in our world today, death is something that's so hidden from everyday existence that it's terrifying because we are not familiar with it. In so many of the Baba Yaga stories, she is seen as a partner with death. So let's unpack that for a second. If she's seen as a partner of death, on first glance, it goes back to the like classic horror movie version of this witch that she is in this storybook context. But if you look at her inspirations prior to even her written record, her first written record in 1755, I believe, and if I'm getting that date wrong, excuse me. Her first written record recorded her not as a character. Her first written record recorded her in a list of goddesses.
Mhm.
She was Baba Yaga, and one of her big traits was this woman who was almost a midwife that guided souls into the world at birth, but also guided souls out of the world at death. It was, again, the cycle that we are talking about. She is not this person who came and killed you. She was there as a partner in these moments of transition. One of my favorite metaphors that the academic Andreas Johns uses with her is she's like the metaphor of a plow. She is a bit terrifying, but what is a plow? It tears apart the earth to allow something new to grow.
Right.
And I think sometimes in our modern world, we want to shy away from anything dark and shadowy and scary. There's enough scary in the world, and I totally get that. But I think the reason people are flocking to Baba Yaga right now is she is an accessible way to confront the horror that exists in the world right now. And through her, we are finding out kind of how, when things are very messed up, where can there be birth? Where can there be growth? Where can there be transformation? And when sometimes we access that through an old oral tradition, it has an ability to shape our lives so much more than, I don't know, something we watch online, right?
Totally. You know, one of the things that I deal with my clients, with my students and one-on-one coaching is people coming to me saying, I don't have confidence.
Mm,
Right. And so we are breeding a lack of confidence in people by, just keeping everything shiny, new, happy, don't worry about, so when I think about like Grimm's fairy tales, why
mm,
are they so dark? Right. Well, for me, I see so much value in the darkness of those stories because they're preparing children for the harshness of reality.
right.
We don't do that anymore.
We don't. And I mean, the world is scary. I
Yeah.
mean, open up, I was about to say the newspaper. I'm dating myself. Open up whatever news media there is, open the doors, walk outside. There's a lot of scary out in the world. There's also a lot of hope. And that's again where Baba Yaga exists on this plane that is unique. She shows us the horror, but she also shows us the hope. And I think in terms of world goddesses, in terms of world witches, however you want to frame who she is, who she was, who she's still becoming, this dichotomy of hope and horror. What is more modern than that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I mean, and that is, it's the essence of reality.
Mhm.
It's getting down to what things really are, right? um Death is so much more prevalent than life. Like life is just this little blip in between
Mm,
death, and if you believe in reincarnation or anything like that, it's like you have this short little time here being alive, then you return back to the essence of everything, and then maybe you do it again and again. But like death is eternal, where life is fleeting, and we're in such collective denial about that.
right,
Yeah, it's
right.
wild. So, these old stories and mythologies and, you know, all of it, it's so good for us. It's so healthy to look
Mhm,
at it and understand it and have um to integrate it into who you are. When you look at various pagan pantheons through, let's say, like the psychological model of magic, then you've got these same group of gods in almost every pantheon, where you have a god of love and a god of death and a god of anger and war, because these are universal experiences that you need to understand. And we can, because we are anthropomorphic beings, we anthropomorphize everything in our minds, and that's kind of why we live our life through stories. So when you can understand
right,
these things as a story rather than some like abstract concept, you really get it. You can integrate it, and it can become part of who you are.
exactly. And it's fascinating when you think about kind of ancient gods and goddesses and mythology, modern versions as well. In that publication that I mentioned, where it was Baba Yaga's first historical record of being written down. It was a 1755 book. The book was called The Russian Grammar. It was a textbook. And in that textbook, there is a table of world deities. And you have the Roman god Jupiter next to the Slavic god Perun. And you have all of these people in their categories and their equivalents. And then you have Baba Yaga. And of all of the deities across all of the world, Baba Yaga stood alone. How amazing is that? And again, no matter what your entry point is and where your moment of light bulb hits, your thunder hits, like your it's crashing, wherever your moment, your spark of interest in her exists, that's one of my favorites. Because if in her first known record of someone writing down about her, she had no counterparts the world over, oh, there's so much to unpack there.
There
And
is. Yeah.
I'm Ukrainian. I grew up with Eastern European sensibilities, you could say, in many ways. But if you have no Eastern European blood in you, that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't access these stories. World stories are there to teach us and to learn from.
Mhm.
It's so important to listen and learn and read and explore, because this is how we become stronger versions of ourselves. Listening, of course, is kind of the key piece of that. Listening and thinking more than the speaking.
Yeah. Oh gosh, absolutely. That's another thing that, just in the world of coaching people, and I don't think of myself as any kind of like life coach, but a lot of what I do through tarot ends up being coaching, right? And I've been through some
Right.
coaching programs myself, and I think they're tremendously valuable. But one of the things that I've learned from that, you can't speak and listen at the same time, for one thing. While you're listening, some people listen while formulating a response, and some people can really listen. Right.
Mhm.
So when you can really listen and then take a moment to pause, formulate your response, you have the conversation is infinitely better. Right. But it seems like everyone does this, whether they're already planning their response or they're really just not hearing what you're saying. They're having a conversation with themselves. It's
Right.
incredibly frustrating, so listening is such an incredible skill. And it's one of the skills
Absolutely.
that I think we've lost because we've lost our oral traditions.
Mm. Oh, that's a great connection. That's a fascinating connection, and it is quite true. I mean, the oral storytelling and the passing down of histories and the passing down of family stories and the passing down of cultural stories to from those around us is such a powerful piece of growth. That's another reason I think the Baba Yaga stories can be very fascinating is because when Christianity swept into Eastern Europe and changed belief systems, and when different cultural revolutions and government movements and all these things swept and pushed and pulled on the Baba Yaga stories and traditions and beliefs, who was it that was actually continuing to tell the stories? It was most frequently the grandmothers. It was
Mhm.
most frequently the old women who had the time, and I won't say leisure because different times and different difficulties in different eras of the world and different locations of the world, but it was the grandmothers who were often the ones who were the storytellers for the next generations. And the grandmothers told those tales about this strong female presence with wisdom. And you know what? There's some scary in the world. We're going to put that right in that story. We're going to include that. But by hearing these stories of horror, yet growth, yet hope, yet complication and quests, the grandmothers preserved Baba Yaga for what she was.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so great. I want the world to go back to this understanding of the importance of storytelling. It would be so incredible. Something you touched on throughout your book that I want to talk about is that you've noted over and over again that Baba Yaga becomes a scapegoat, kind of, right? She's turned into this anti-Semitic figure, to this evil woman, to, just being a figure that absorbs all the bad in the world and becomes, the thing to be afraid of. So, how did that affect you while writing it? How did it what did it bring out in you, and what do you think it says about the world?
You'll notice the word feminist is in the title of the book. And that's a big piece of the fight and kick and spirit of Baba Yaga. She can be made invisible, and women in the world today can be made invisible, especially older women can be made
Mhm.
invisible.
Yeah.
She can be made into this horrific figure, where she all of a sudden has all of these anti-Semitic traits, and she's in this kind of other category to be like, oh, we don't want to look at whatever that population is, and it's been multiple different populations that she has been lumped into as this horror factor because we want to make sure we stay away from whoever that group is. Um, there's a moment of kind of fear of her, of this idea of the only way you can kind of access wisdom from this old woman is to be terrified in the process. There's so unpack, but that's where you look at the telephone game of who she is and who controls her stories, and that's where you learn about, okay, well, what was the Russian government like under Stalin, and the morality campaign that was led with Baba Yaga as the bad guy, because if you aren't a good little obedient child, then Baba Yaga will eat you. Um, how's that for a tale to raise your children on? Um, she's put into so many boxes, but what I love about her is she always gets her way out of them.
Mhm.
And that's why we need to talk about her. And that's what I think we can take as inspiration. There are going to be people who define us incorrectly. There are going to be people who ignore us. There are going to be people who belittle us. And there are going to be people who are scared of us when our white hairs pop out in our heads or our wrinkles appear or whatever is going on with our lives. People will judge. People will always judge. But just doesn't care, and she keeps going. And you know what? That's some inspiration on the worst of our days when we're feeling at our most rotten or our most undeserving or our most downtrodden. Baba Yaga is a fierce spirit who keeps going on. And you know what? Are you doing deeds or are you running from them? What are you going to do with yourself? Me, I'm trying to hold on to that question every single day. And it's funny to me that I wrote a book called Becoming Baba Yaga that is the story of her spiritual, historical, archaeological, literary growth and change. But at the same time, you could easily put this book into a self-help category. There's a lot of inspiration there too, or at least that's the goal.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that is so true about magic and witchcraft in general. And right. And this is something that I put a huge emphasis on in my own school and the way that I teach, because I think a lot of people get into magic and witchcraft like it's a hobby. And like there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. Like it's fun. Magic and witchcraft are fun, but they're a fun method of self-transformation. They are a fun method of changing reality. And what's the purpose of changing reality is to make reality better. That's transformation. If you seek to improve your life, that's self-improvement, right?
Mm.
So, at the core of what magic and witchcraft are, for me personally, it is self-transformation. Right. And so the most powerful archetypes that we have, and Baba Yaga is clearly one of these very powerful archetypes of the witch, of witchcraft, is, she embodies that transformation, right? With the mortar and pestle and with everything she's been through, and throwing these elements of darkness and saying this is what she is. And oh gosh, and that too, something that I think I don't know collectively, or if it's just people I interact with, but I get a lot of people. If I run an ad for one of my programs, where I got a million Christians coming to tell me that I need to find Jesus, right? And the thing is, what a lot of people seem to be confused about: good and evil are not symbols. They are a measure of your actions and nothing else. Okay, I don't care if you go to church every Sunday and you do everything just right. You can still be a racist piece of shit and you're a bad person. Okay, and I don't care if you are a card carrying member of the Church of Satan. You can still be a wonderful person. Right?
Mm.
It's a measure of your actions in life, and it's not about darkness or light either. These things get confused with good and evil. Light can't exist without darkness, for one thing. You have to have balance. But we get confused about what's what. We think dark must be evil, or this set of symbols is evil and this set of symbols is good, and it's a way of obfuscating what are your actions, right? What are your deeds?
Absolutely. And if you focus in on your actions, if you focus in on your deeds, that's where you're empowered, no matter your belief system.
Yeah.
That's where the judgment falls away and you just focus on being your best self, no matter what darkness of the woods is around us. And that's a metaphor that is oh so apt in the modern day.
Yeah. I do hope that Bobby, because I'm inspired. I was inspired by your book. I'm inspired by
Yeah.
Baba Yaga. Um, and a lot of people in their practice of magic, especially in a modern eclectic practice, choose a patron and a matron spirit, right? And there's a lot of popular ones for each. But I'm really just I can feel it. I'm not gonna stop thinking about Baba Yaga as like this is the feminine archetype that really speaks to me. I feel a
Absolutely.
connection, and that's spectacular. I love the deep imagery and symbolism, and you included all of it in your book, and you broke it all down. Um, and the transformation in terms of what she has been through, and to become, as you were saying, like kind of the it girl now, right? Like that's so amazing, from having been this anti-Semitic figure of pure evil to now us seeing her as in I guess I don't know if we could say her true form, but the a form that is at least more inclusive and more holistic than some Disney villain, which it seems to me, now that I'm thinking about it, many of the old witches in Disney movies are clearly based on Baba Yaga. So Beauty and the Beast, Snow White, you see her over and over again.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things that we often look back at Grimm, but long before Grimm was Baba Yaga.
Yeah.
And people migrate, people trade, belief systems migrated along with goods, right? And stories, especially stories, take root and travel. And that's the cool thing about humanity and the world and how we have moved through the ages. Stories catch on. And that's why I always talk about her as a telephone game. The teller changes the story every single time. And then when you trace back through all the versions of who she has been, we get to see ourselves in the mirror and humanity itself. And that's just endlessly fascinating to me.
It is. Okay, so I have one final question for you. What if you could pinpoint one thing in your own life in which Baba Yaga has inspired a transformation, what would it be?
Hmm, that's a very good question. I think it goes back to the question that I've noted that whether in kind of your professional life or your personal life, there are sometimes moments where you don't want to confront something because it will be difficult.
Yeah.
There are no, I'm not saying confronting people, but just issues, concerns, problems. Sometimes it's very easy to take a step away. I'm not going to deal with that right now. Or it would be a whole lot easier to get through this situation if I didn't deal with that. Let me deal with the easier to control things over here. But in focusing on this question of are you doing deeds or running from them and truly thinking on it, what is it that you're running from?
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're looking at your daily life and you're noticing, you know what, there are a couple things that I'm kind of avoiding here. Not to say that anyone is a terrible person for avoiding challenging things. We are all trying our best to live our lives every single day, however we can. But by zeroing in on that one question, I focus not only on the deeds I want to do, the person I want to be, the family member I want to be, the deeds I want to do, but also the what am I running from? What is there out in my life that I don't have to run from, that I can meet face to face? It might be a scary face, but hello, Baba Yaga, right?
You know what? Yeah, and I think that is probably why it's really touched me and why I feel inspired by it, because there's certainly things in my life that I avoid. Bureaucracy is a huge one, you know.
Mhm.
And it really spoke to me, like, you know what, get up and send the emails you need to send, and go stand in the line at the DMV if you have to. Go do the thing, right? Just get up and go do it and get it accomplished. And I absolutely love that. So Kris, thank you so much for your book, and thank you for being on the show. This has been a fantastic talk, and again, I absolutely loved your book. Highly recommend it to everyone who's interested either in mythology, in folklore, or in magic. It's going to be there for everybody. um, is there anything you wanted to speak on or plug before we wrap up here?
Thanks so much. Again, it's been an honor to speak with you. If you are a nonfiction person, I am, or even if you're not a nonfiction, the latest book, Becoming Baba Yaga, I am so proud of how it came together. And I feel like there's so many takeaways, no matter who you are, as you just said. And I will just say that if you're a fiction person, my book prior to this, which was my literary introduction to Baba Yaga in terms of my own work, I actually have a novel called The Baba Yaga Mask. And that book is looking at an idea of a Ukrainian grandmother who survived World War II and in the present day is really absorbing this idea of how do we make the world into a better place? The world is terrifying. What if I really leaned into Baba Yaga and I can scare the world into being a better place? And it's a wild goose chase across Eastern Europe. And she goes lost, and her two granddaughters, who are very different life experiences, are on a wild goose chase unpacking Ukrainian World War II history and Ukrainian traditions and folklore of the Eastern European region. So I just wanted to say, if anybody is a fiction reader, I'm going to give a little plug for that one as well. If anyone wants to follow me on Instagram, my website, wherever, it's just krisspisak.com, or on Instagram, kris.spisak, Kris, dot Spisak. But otherwise, that's it for me. I have so greatly enjoyed this conversation.
So have I, and I will include links to both of your books. Well, I know you've got five, but both your books about Baba Yaga, at least in the description of the episode, as well as your socials. Baba Yaga's Mask. That's probably gonna be the book that I read next. I haven't gotten my fill yet of Baba Yaga. So thank you so much, Kris. It's been wonderful speaking with you, and I will see you later.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.